miles from the airport, like here in Athens at the airport there. You would find their planes somewhere the other side of Winterville, Georgia, because they were getting scarce. But anyway, that's what we did, and came back. We would fly back, go up on our wing tanks, external tanks, drop them, and then use the gasoline tanks. I was at a gathering here this past week, and they told the story about one unfortunate pilot who flew up on his droppable tanks by mistake, and then when he was ready to go into a strafing situation, you dropped your tanks. Well, he had failed to go, I take it back, he flew up on his internal tanks by mistake and then dropped his external wing tanks, which were full of gas. There he was up there over Japan with no gas, and so he had to bail out. And incidentally, I think the pilots that were captured and the crewmen of 29s and 51s or whatever airplanes were there were just about every one of them killed after the atomic bomb was dropped, were executed there one way or another. On one of my missions to Nagoya, I was flying the wing of Jack Art, and as we flew over the target, something hit my plane. I didn't know what, but we were right on the ground. And I pulled up and looked around and to ascertain what was hit. And I noticed is out on my wing it'd been hit by some sort of a 20 millimeter or whatever. And I flew on back to the mission, never saw to the rally point, never saw Jack Art again. And after the war, I called Marcus McDilda, who was shot down on that same raid, and he said that Art was executed. Said they gave him the honor of being killed with his own 45. We carried a 45, some of us did. I did, always carried my 45 with me on a mission. And we would fly up to Japan, 750 miles, and by signal, they would have a submarine that would surface right outside off the coast of Japan. Oh, I guess it was 5 miles or so out there. And if you had trouble or had to parachute, you'd shoot. They would pick you up. They had a submarine would surface on, make rendezvous, whatever, certain hour. Another 150 miles south of there. If you had trouble, you could bail out and pick you up. And then they had destroyers. Another 150 miles. There was about 5 or 4 pickup points that you could be rescued in case you had engine trouble. And the P-51s, of course, you could lose oil or you could lose your coolant, and that would mean that you were out of luck being on just the one engine, and you'd be rescued that way. But I was in the 46th Fighter Squadron, and I just came from a gathering out in San Diego the other day, and there was 14 of us there, and I was a baby. I'm 70 years old, and everybody else was 71 and so forth. And thinking back to that time on Evo, our squadron commander was there, and he was 28 years old, and he's still around, he and his wife, and we had a good reunion.
How many of y'all were left?
I don't know. We're trying to recollect who's died and who was sick and who was still alive. I imagine when I was in the 46, it started out at the beginning, I guess, on the war year in 1941 or 42. And they was, Jack said, down in Canton and down in the Guadalcanal, wherever, and they made their final way up to Iwo Jima. And of course, I guess it might have been 100 and so people that, as pilots I was thinking of, and officers went through the 46 and either through reassignment, doing their tour of duty, or being killed in action, or coming back to the States and dying. I imagine 50% of us no longer alive.
We had a reunion of the 45th Squadron 2 years ago at Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which Ruth and I went to, and at that reunion, this was just the 46th, there were some 18 couples still.
got a question for both of you, Dan. And I'll probably, some of these general questions I ask a lot, I'll toss out for either of you. Could y'all tell me how you remember hearing of the bombing at Pearl Harbor on December 6th of 41?
December 7th.
December 7th, yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Get the terminology. I was in school at Piedmont College, which is a little college up in North Georgia, and I learned it up there. And of course, everybody of our age said, well, I'm going to go and enlist right away, which a lot of us did, most of us did. But I was in college at Piedmont College in North Georgia at that time.
Do you remember the instant that you heard about it?
No, it was on Sunday morning, but I do not specifically remember whether I was at breakfast or.
But did it come to you over the radio waves, or did someone tell you, or do you remember?
I don't specifically remember. We didn't have radios in our room, so I expect somebody told me.
Mm-hmm.
I was at VMI that Sunday. I didn't want to go to church, so I'd called in and said I was sick, which I wasn't, but I had to go down to the infirmary and take a slug of Fleet's phosphate of soda, and was confined to the barracks that day. It's a quadrangle, and I remember somebody running in. It was an open quadrangle, running, yelling out, "Of bomb Pearl Harbor," and that sticks with me today as vivid as most any event in my life.
What were you studying at VMI?
I was going to major in chemistry, and I was on Iwo Jima, and there was a fellow there, Bradley Smith, who had graduated from Yale University, and he got me interested in Yale, and I applied to Yale after the war and attended there and got my degree in sociology. For some reason, sociology at Yale.
And Mr. Thornton, what were you studying at Piedmont College at the time before the war?
I was in the pre-business curriculum. I was headed for a business degree, but after the war, I didn't go back to Piedmont. I came to the University of Georgia because we lived here.
What did you gentlemen think of Franklin Delano Roosevelt during those years at the time? I'm interested in.
He was the great savior at that time, because that was probably the beginning of what we now experience in socialism to a great degree. But at the time, he did what had to be done, I think.
I didn't have any particular opinion other than I knew my dad disliked him very much. And he wrote me when Roosevelt died, he said he poured himself out a big drink of liquor.
Roosevelt died on my birthday in 1944, April the 12th.
Now, I heard he died at Warm Springs
He did.
in Georgia. Yeah.
He died on April the 12th, 1944.
And at the time, very few people knew a lot about the vice president. Did you all think anything either way of Harry Truman?
I never heard of it. But he turned out to be a good president.
I thought he turned out a good president, but
Yeah, he was practically a nobody at that time. 'Cause I guess that was the way they did politics then. You chose a vice president, whoever the president wanted. He didn't want to get in the way, but he had to have somebody.
I guess they're doing that still after that.
I guess so. Probably so.
Can you recall for me what you thought of some of the commanders in the Pacific Theater, people like MacArthur?
MacArthur was thought of in the little circle that I traveled in as a ignomaniac, pompous rascal. I don't know whether that was generally the thought or not.
It spilled over my group, and the word was when that famous picture of him returning to the Philippines, that the rascal had to get the Marines to take the wash off the line so that they could take a picture of him waiting on the field. But
He was a
we
brilliant.
cared very little for him. I thought he was a...
He was, but having said that, he was a brilliant general.
I don't
He
know.
was not well liked in the Army Air Corps. I'll say that.
Who were your commanders in the Army Air Corps?
Hap Allen was the overall commander at that time. I don't specifically recall. We had several different squadron commanders, but I never had any contact beyond the squadron commander. That's far.
Well, who was the brigadier general that came up there?
Brigadier General Moore.
Yeah.
Moore. He was the commanding general of the 7th Fighter Command, which a command usually has a bomb command and a fighter command, but the 7th only had a fighter command, and never did have a bomb command that I know of. And actually, we were under the 20th Air Force in the Pacific, which was the Air Force that had the B-29s and so forth.
Did your machinery hold up pretty well?
Oh, yeah.
I'm back here.
Yeah.
It was a 7-hour flight, you know, and single engine.
7 to 8 hours.
Sitting there just like I had to sit in this seat for 7.5 hours. Go up there and strafe the Japs, fly cover, and come back. And luckily I made it 10 times.
Those planes didn't have many amenities like a airliner now. You could smoke, which we did in the plane. Yeah, you could smoke. Had a tube, which was a funnel, a pipe that went down through the bottom of the airplane.
Yeah.
You pull it up between your legs if you needed to.
Yeah, I remember my first mission, you know, and you're flying up there. We came in, what, at 10,000 feet, something like that.
And you're scared as hell.
Yeah, and I looked out there and here this island of Japan, and you know, Honshu came into focus, and I was scared to death.
Sure you were.
Oh man, that was a frightening experience. But once I started firing my gun, I was not afraid in here. That was gone. I just concentrated on firing the guns, keeping from running into a water tower or whatever. And my fear was gone.
Mount Fuji, which was a beautiful sight flying north toward Japan, the first thing you would see would be Mount Fujiyama on Japan, which is a big snow-capped mountain, 14,000 feet elevation, I think, or something like that. It's a beautiful sight.
Ice on top, snow on top.
Snow and ice, yeah.
I remember one thing, it was golf courses down there. You could see the golf courses in Japan from back then. I didn't know the Japs were playing golf until recent years, but they must
Now
have been
they've
playing back
bought,
then.
and now they've bought our golf courses over here. That's life.
Were these missions mostly flying alone, or were there other crewmen in the air with you?
You flew by squadrons. A group was 3 squadrons, and each squadron has
A flight. Which was the difference between a group and a flight?
a group has different squadrons under it, and the squadron has 4 flights in flying. 4 flights make up a squadron, and in our case, a flight is 4 single-engine ships. So our squadron would fly 16 P-51s together. When I say together, I mean close together. And the way we would get to Japan from Iwo Jima, a B-29 would come up to Iwo Jima at a given time, and we would take off and rendezvous with that B-29 and fly him. That is, we would fly on his wing, and he would lead us to Japan.
Wasn't it 3 B-29s go up there?
Probably one for each squadron, yes.
Yeah. I remember one day, we were there in the 29s. We would leave the 29s about 3, 4, 5 miles off the coast of Japan. They would stay in circle. And we'd go in and rendezvous back with them. And I remember one day in real perfect English, somebody was saying, bring the B-29 over land. We need to see them over land. They need some help, or we need some help. And it was obvious that it wasn't one of us talking. It was too perfect thing of English. And somebody on the radio said, Tojo eats shit. And that's the last we heard from them on the radio. They shut up.
I didn't hear that.
You weren't on that mission, I remember that.
I did hear Tokyo Roads a time or two.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask.
Tokyo Roads broadcasted from Japan over some kind of a powerful radio, and we heard them on occasion. She would say, you orphans out there on Iwo Jima, aren't you homesick? Don't you wish you could go home to see your mom and your girlfriend? All such stuff as that, to try to break morale, which we didn't. We laughed at it.
Well, we were listening in, you know. We enjoyed listening to Tokyo, and she had some pretty good music.
Yeah.
And Tokyo, I remember one time that the Yellow Nose Squadron, which was next to us, I forget the number, was Colonel Major Krim was in charge, and they went up there and they supposedly strafed some streetcars. And she knew the name of Krim, and she called them Krim's criminals. And she said that night that if we ever catch any of those Yellow Nose Squadron people, we will kill them. But they were strafing the...
Well, they killed them, whether they were yellow nose or not.
Yeah, but she and I wondered how they knew the name of Krim. Well, at the reunion the other day, the American reunion, crashed on his first mission. Crash landed, and they picked him up and quizzed him, and he told them who his squadron commander was. I think, you know, like I talked to Marcus McDilda after the war, and McDilda was picked up in Nagoya Bay. He had landed there and got in his little dinghy, and he said that they had him in an interrogation room, and he said all you're supposed to say, he thought, was name, rank, and serial number, and said that the Jap officer took his sword and he showed me the scar and rammed it through the scar and through his cheek and said, "You talk." And Jack said, "I told him everything. In fact, I told him how to make the atomic bomb." He said, "They flew me and an airman off the B-29 down to Tokyo." They went in the Nagoya compound and had him interviewed there in an auditorium. He conjured up what he remembered from high school physics and told him how the sunlight worked on the bomb and it exploded. And said when he got out of the room, said they, a Jap there gave him a wooden bucket of water to drink, and the Jap was a graduate of CCNY. And he said he told the Jap, said, "I don't know anything about that bomb." Said they had a nice conversation as such as it was. But he and that airman survived the Nagoya compound. The rest of them, like I said, Jack ordered earlier, were all killed. And he survived, he and the sergeant off of 29, because he happened just by coincidence been sent to Tokyo for how the bomb worked.
Good gosh. What did you guys hear of the explosion of the atomic bomb?
I didn't hear. I was on the way back. I guess maybe I was back in the States by that time. But it might be, a little aside here, might be interesting. When I was in that big general hospital in Guam, on Guam, and I guess it was in July 1945, the other occupants of the hospital, a lot of them were connected with the B-29 groups. And I remember those guys down there from the B-29 outfits would take your money, it would fade, what kind of money you could get up that the war would be over within 60 days. This was in July, and sure enough it was over, and the bomb was dropped on August the 6th and the 9th. They knew there was something that we didn't know, but they knew there was something big that happened. And they would bet any kind of money you wanted the war to be over.
I remember, telling me, but it wasn't any significance to our group. I mean, the bomb had been dropped, or 2 bombs.
Were you still on Evo at that time?
Yeah.
Do y'all remember hearing any news of victory in Europe immediately before that?
Yeah.
May of that year or something?
Yeah, we heard it. It was just a news item. We weren't directly concerned with it. It was just another step to getting us all over with and get back home. But yeah, we had the VE Day. And I was back in the States at VG Day. I don't remember where I was specifically.
In Japan, I was on the way from Iwo in a C-47 down to Guam to pick up a P-51 to fly it back. We were all, a group of us, when they said the Japs had agreed to surrender. And I know the surrender ceremony, I didn't go. Somebody said, "You want to go up there?" They were, P-51s were going to fly cover, part of the ceremony. And I always thought back, I wish I'd gone, but I said, no, I pressed my luck long enough flying up to Japan, so I didn't go. But
You could have seen General MacArthur preside.
yeah, I could have buzzed in Missouri.
That's right.
Can you gentlemen tell me anything about the food and the treatment that